Today I'm making powdered milk slash dehydrated milk. Yeah, that's right. Well, powdered milk is really interesting stuff. Unlike a normal video on how to make something, this video is more of an experiment just to see if I can make powdered milk. This process is somewhat difficult and definitely requires some specialized equipment, but hopefully a few of you out there will find the process at least a little interesting. And also, this video will be my first collaboration. Today I'm collaborating with QDragon, where he has a good idea of what you can make with powdered milk, so I'll explain a little bit more about that at the end of the video. So for the actual powdered milk, let's get started. So unlike normally, I won't be starting at my kitchen, but at my desk. As I said earlier, you need to do some weird stuff to get powdered milk. Primarily something called vacuum reduction. This is the process of boiling at a lower pressure than what you can do at atmosphere. Liquids at lower pressure will have a lower boiling point, meaning that you can boil the liquid without heating it up so much. This is why at higher elevations where the atmospheric pressure is lower, the boiling point is also lower. We can use this principle to our advantage. One thing that happens during boiling is that water evaporates, leaving a thicker concentration of what we were boiling behind. In cooking, boiling is a process of removing water from whatever you're cooking. So think, for example, about reducing a sauce down. The problem is that boiling occurs at a relatively high temperature, and this can destroy the things that you want in your liquid. Think, for example, this juice from strawberries. It tastes nice and fresh and bright, but once the juice is heated up, it tastes completely different. This is because the heat has destroyed a lot of the enzymes and a lot of the parts of the juice that give the flavors that we associate with something being fresh. And also, this technique works not only for flavors, but also for vitamins. So if you want to maintain the level of vitamins that we had in our milk before boiling, for example, vitamin D, it's heat sensitive. By boiling at a lower temperature, we can get rid of the water and leave the vitamins there. So this is kind of why we need vacuum reduction. So let's actually get started with the video. I ordered some parts from Banggood. Basically everything for this video I ordered from there. I'll try to include links in the description below in case you're interested in buying these parts yourself and building something similar. The key thing here is actually the vacuum pump. So this here is the vacuum pump. The main thing with this is that most vacuum pumps can't handle liquids, so you need to find one that does. That can handle liquids or vapors. And this one can, but it didn't come with any connections. So basically I had to solder the power for the vacuum pump onto it. Please excuse my bad soldering skills. It's technically part of my job, but I still really suck at it. But once it's soldered, we should be good here, and I'm going to add some electrical tape just to prevent any problems with shorting, especially in the kitchen. I got this flask here as well, and initially it was designed for vacuum filtration. I had to do some jerry rigging to actually get a pressure gauge on top. I used some Sucru to seal any leaks up, and this actually really worked. So I was able to get to half an atmosphere easily just in this initial test, and I was even able to get lower later. So now I have a handy dandy vacuum flask. The next day I set up the flask and weighed how much milk I had. I added about 320 grams of milk. Sorry for not tearing the scale so you guys can see actually how much I added. Then I set this on my hot plate and started pumping the vacuum flask down. I was able to get roughly down to 1/3 of an atmosphere, which is pretty nice, and this is more than enough for us. So after a few minutes of heating, the milk actually began to boil. Keep in mind, it's at a much lower temperature than if it was at atmosphere. Unfortunately, I didn't have a proper temperature measurement, but it was really easy to see. If I saw it boiling, I could remove the hose and let it vent back to atmosphere, and the boiling would immediately stop. After initially pumping down, I turned the vacuum pump off. As the liquid began to boil, it became a gas, and this increased the pressure within the container. So you'll need to constantly turn the pump back on, and at this point I didn't feel really comfortable with leaving the pump on constantly, but actually it turns out it wasn't a problem. But first, before that, I had some issues with the hose that I was using. It began collapsing and not allowing the pump to do its job. So after a few minutes of futzing around, I came up with a solution that worked, and you can see that I have a different hose connected to the flask. After I worked out all the bugs, back to the drawing board. I put this thing on the heating plate, I left the pump on, I set the heat to about medium-high, and allowed this to go for about 20 minutes. I kept an eye on it, a very close eye, and after about 20 minutes, I felt comfortable that I had reduced enough. After about 20 minutes, you can see that the milk is much thicker than it was before. You can see this based on the fact that the bubbles are getting much larger before popping. At this point, the hoses connecting the pump to the flask were giving me a lot of trouble, and I wasn't able to get much more than 0.8 atmospheres. So I figured this might be a good point to stop, so I removed the flask and vented it. So once it cooled down, I was able to look at it more, and as you can see, it's much thicker than it was initially. It also tastes a lot like evaporated milk. milk. Now to get to the powdered milk stage, you'd normally do cool stuff like spray evaporation, but unfortunately I don't have fancy tools like that at hand, so I decided to go low tech with my dehydrator. I had to come up with some weird solutions to be able to fit this into my dehydrator, but in the end, the aluminum foil worked. I put the milk into the trays and began dehydrating. Now, some of you might be wondering, why didn't I just put the milk in the dehydrator to begin with and not bother with all of this vacuum reduction stuff? And that's a very, very good question. And the real answer is, I don't know. When looking into powdered milk, a lot of sources say that you need to evaporate the milk first, and I'm actually not sure why that is. So if we have any cool food scientists watching this channel who can shed light on the situation, I would really appreciate it. But it's also just about the fun here. At least that's what I'm telling myself now. But moving on, the next day it came out like this, and it was super fun to peel off. Not really. But once I did, I had nice hard crystal chunks of milk. And at this point, all there was left to do was grind it up in a mortar and pestle, and bam, powdered milk. Now, a few points. First off, I really wouldn't recommend doing this if you can just buy powdered milk. And as I just want to restate, this was kind of just a way to play around with vacuum condensers. And if you're also interested in doing this, this was a hell of a lot of fun for me. I actually ended up trying to add it to water and turning it back into milk, but it didn't dissolve very well. And I imagine this has to do with the dehydrator method. Using a proper spray dryer might actually fix this problem. But what I can imagine this being used for is incorporating it into other recipes as an additive. Some recipes, for example, require that you need powdered milk as an ingredient. For example, Nutella, like my good friend Q-Dragon did on his channel. Now, I totally recommend going over to his channel and checking out his fine work over there with his exploration of making Nutella from scratch. He used a conch, and it's really cool. You know, if you happen to make powdered milk, this might be a good place to put it in. Just a small ending thing. We're both a kind of small cooking channel, and if you're interested in nerdy cooking videos, please consider subscribing. It will really help our channels grow. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I've been getting so many nice comments. I've actually started to notice there's a small community of people who are commenting on every video, and it's so nice. Keep up the good work, guys, and I've got some really cool stuff in the future. Again, check out Q-Dragon's channel, and I'll see you guys next week.